On count 1, violation of the Georgia RICO Act, 20 years to serve in confinement. On count 10, life in confinement.
It's not looking good for Cash Out. The rapper just got sentenced to 70 years, and to make matters worse, fresh footage of him behind bars just surfaced. And let's just say he'd be lucky to last a year. What led to this dramatic downfall? And why does it feel like his story might end here? I've got the full details. Let's break it down. When the streets caught up, the trial and life sentence. Cash Out, once hailed as one of hip-hop's most promising talents, is now in deep trouble. He was indicted on multiple serious charges, including racketeering, aggravated sodomy, and unlawful restraint, accused of orchestrating a human trafficking operation that victimized several women across Atlanta. On June 2nd, 2025, he finally faced the music in Fulton County Superior Court before Judge Melanie Leftridge. Over the next 7 weeks, the public got a front row seat to just how extensive this alleged operation was. Inside that courtroom, prosecutors unveiled next-level evidence, arguing that Cash Out ran a criminal enterprise far more sophisticated than anyone on the streets could have imagined. The prosecution came correct with their case, led by Fulton County Deputy District Attorney Ernell Winfrey, and they weren't playing around. These folks walked into court with what they said was an airtight case built on multiple layers of evidence that would be hard for any defense team to counter. The evidence they brought to the table was absolutely overwhelming. We're talking about text messages from 8 different phones, jail calls, phone records, financial documents, surveillance footage, and victim testimonies. That's the type of comprehensive case building that shows investigators had been documenting this alleged operation from every possible angle, creating a web of proof that would be difficult to escape. The most powerful part of the prosecution's case came from the victims themselves. These weren't just accusations being thrown around. These were detailed accounts of alleged systematic abuse that painted a picture of what these women supposedly went through. One of the most damaging testimonies came from Cash Out's own ex-girlfriend, who claimed he forced her to have sex with other men for money while they were together. The emotional impact of these victim testimonies hit the courtroom hard. One victim testified that she was only fed if she performed commercial acts, which showed what prosecutors said was a system of control that used basic human needs as weapons. That type of psychological manipulation goes way beyond just being a street hustler. That's some calculated predator behavior.
The day these defendants chose to commit these crimes against me, they gave me a life sentence.
Even though we restored her body, we have been unsuccessful in saving and healing the person because of the trauma that these animals delivered.
The prosecution's whole argument was that this wasn't just some individual criminal acts by a rapper who lost his way. They argued this was a 7-year reign of terror that was organized, systematic, and devastating to everyone involved. Prosecutor Ernell Winfrey made it clear that this wasn't just straight pimping, but trafficking, emphasizing that the crimes involved systematic exploitation rather than just some street-level hustle. Cash Out's defense team, led by attorney Carton R. Matthews, had their work cut out for them trying to counter all this evidence. Their strategy was to question witness credibility and challenge how the prosecution was interpreting the evidence. Matthews argued that the state couldn't prove there was actually a criminal enterprise and called the RICO charges overblown. The defense tried to poke holes in the case by highlighting inconsistencies in the accuser's testimonies, pointing out that some victims had voluntarily reconnected with Cash Out and had contradicted themselves. They also criticized the prosecution for what they said was overcharging, presenting conflicting counts for the same incidents and relying on co-defendants who got plea deals in exchange for their cooperation. But when July 18th, 2025 came around, all those defense arguments couldn't stand up against the weight of evidence the prosecution had presented. After 7 weeks of trial, a Fulton County jury found Cash Out guilty on multiple serious charges. The convictions included aggravated sodomy, 2 counts of trafficking people for sexual servitude, RICO violations, pimping, pandering, keeping a place of prostitution, battery, possession of a firearm during a felony, obstruction, and contraband charges. What's significant is that Cash Out was found not guilty on some charges. 1 count of felony aggravated assault, 1 count of trafficking for sexual servitude, and 1 count of maintaining a place of prostitution. Those acquittals showed the jury was really considering each charge carefully instead of just accepting everything, which made the guilty verdicts even more meaningful. His co-defendants got hit hard too. Linda Smith was convicted on trafficking and RICO charges, while Tyrone Taylor was found guilty on almost everything except pimping, including aggravated sodomy and RICO violations. One juror spoke anonymously to WSB-TV and said the decision was difficult, but the evidence was compelling. The juror explained that they reviewed the 46-count indictment carefully, going through each charge systematically systematically, and that the evidence including phone records and victim testimonies painted a clear picture of guilt. 3 days later, on July 21st, 2025, Judge Melanie Leftridge delivered the sentence that would end Cash Out's freedom forever. The sentence she handed down reflected not just the severity of the crimes, but sent a message about what happens when someone allegedly uses their position and influence to exploit others.
Ladies and gentlemen, during the course of this trial, the court heard and viewed evidence demonstrating the very worst of human behavior toward other human beings. The jury verdict in this case reflects that the state met its burden in proving beyond a reasonable doubt that the diabolical conduct of the defendants occurred. The sentencing to be meted out by this court will be responsive to that.
Cash Out got hit with life in prison for the charge, plus an additional 70 years for RICO and other convictions, all running concurrently. When the judge broke down the sentencing, it was clear this was game over for Cash Out.
Mr. John Michael Hakeem Gibson, would you please stand? Okay. On count 1, violation of the Georgia RICO Act, 20 years to serve in confinement to run consecutive with count 10. On count 10, life in confinement. Count 12, aggravated sodomy, life in confinement to run concurrent with count 10.
His family members got sentenced heavy too. Linda Smith got 30 years, 20 for RICO and 10 for trafficking, served consecutively, while Tyrone Taylor was sentenced to life plus 70 years.
Count 22, trafficking a person for servitude. 20 years to serve in confinement to run consecutive with count 1. Count 23, trafficking a person for servitude. 20 years to serve in confinement to run consecutive with count 22. Count 24 on the lesser included offense of battery. 12 months to serve in confinement to run concurrent with count 10. Count 25, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. 5 years to serve in confinement to run consecutive with count 23.
The judge also hit all the defendants with additional restrictions that would follow them for life. They all had to register as offenders, couldn't have any contact with victims or their families, and were banned from specific locations in Metro Atlanta, including Fulton Industrial Boulevard.
Conditions of this sentence: no contact with any of the victims named in the indictment, to include Diamond Irvin or their families. You are to register as a offender. You are to stay away from 737 Alfred Road in Atlanta.
Even with all this evidence stacked against him and the jury's verdict, Cash Out still wasn't ready to accept responsibility. During his sentencing statement, he maintained his innocence and tried to compare himself to biblical figures, claiming he was being falsely accused just like Jesus and other prophets.
I want to start out by thanking you for giving us a fair trial. I want to thank the jurors for the amount of time that they put in to judge this trial. This time being on this trial, I was able to see how the jurors are put in a tough position to, sit there and judge someone's life. And, it's a hard decision, and I felt like they made the wrong judgment. I've done things in my life, I'm not perfect. But the things I've been accused of, I know that I haven't done those things. I know it's typical for a person to come up here and, show remorse to, crimes that they have done, but I can only show remorse to the people that I know that was in this trial, which is not remorse on behalf of like I did anything to them, because if you know me and people who really know me know that I wouldn't force anybody to do anything.
Cash Out kept trying to paint himself as the victim in this whole situation, claiming that witnesses were pressured into testifying against him and that people were being bullied into putting blame on him because he was successful.
I get the situations that people are put in when they're faced with a certain type of crime or a certain type of time, and they're bullied into this situation to put the blame on someone, or to put the blame on Cash Out, or to put the blame on someone who's at the top. That's why I didn't really fault them for their decision. It's baffling. Never forced a woman to commit a sexual act. I've been traveling all around the world from here to Dubai, and you would never hear a woman say that I forced them to do anything or commit with anybody. I don't hang around people that do things of that nature.
The most controversial part of his statement was when he tried to compare his situation to Jesus being falsely accused, which didn't sit well with anyone in that courtroom.
I feel like, and somebody asked me this the other day, it was like, every time I see your head high and you are always smiling, because when you have that confidence, it takes me back to the Bible. When you have that confidence and you know you can be falsely accused of things. Jesus was falsely accused. A lot of the prophets were falsely accused. You don't have that emotion like you've done something. One day, the truth will come out. One day, the truth will come out on my situation. One day, the truth will come out on this allegation that these things never happened. And when you see a person get up on that stand and put their hand on the Bible and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, that means you have to be perfect, like you're Jesus.
His mother, Linda Smith, also spoke during sentencing, but she took a completely different approach. She expressed remorse and talked about finding religion while incarcerated.
So that Saturday, well, the night before, let me back up. I talked to God like I always do. And he said, I must give my testimony to the young ladies in New Beginnings. I was so sorry for the victims, and I pray for them and will continue to pray, because God says, if you love me, you love others. And when I pray wholeheartedly, because that's the path that God put me on. It's been with me for a long time. I just didn't take notice to it.
Judge Leftridge wasn't having any of Cash Out's excuses or comparisons. She made it clear that the evidence showed the very worst of human behavior toward other human beings, and that the sentencing reflected the severity of what had been proven in court. This case has major implications for the hip-hop community because it shows a pattern that's been developing in Georgia. This is the third high-profile RICO prosecution against Atlanta rappers in recent years, following cases against Young Thug and YFN Lucci. DA Fonnie Willis has been using RICO laws aggressively to target what she says are criminal enterprises disguised as music operations. The severity of Cash Out's sentence, effectively multiple life sentences, puts him in a category with the most harshly punished rappers in hip-hop history. The life sentence plus 70 years means he's never seeing the streets again, period. No parole, no early release, no second chances. His attorney said they might file an appeal or try for a new trial, but legal experts are saying that with all the evidence that was presented, phone records, victim testimonies, financial documents, overturning this conviction is going to be extremely difficult. The street enterprise that shook hip-hop. The whole thing started unraveling when the law caught up with Cash Out during a prostitution sting operation in Gwinnett County back in 2019. What looked like just another rapper getting hemmed up by the boys in blue turned out to be the loose thread that would unravel a whole operation that the streets didn't even know was going down. The scope of this alleged hustle was straight bananas, real talk. According to the people trying to lock him up, this operation been running since around 2013 and kept going for over 7 years, which means Homeboy was allegedly building this whole setup right when he was blowing up in the music game. That's some cold-blooded timing if you ask me. The crazy part about this whole situation is how his music label, Pyrez Music Group LLC, allegedly got flipped into something totally different. What should have been about putting artists on and making that bread in the industry got twisted into a front for recruiting and exploiting women. Instead of scouting for the next hot MC, the operation was allegedly scouting for victims.
I'm gonna start off with the same questions I asked everybody else. Like I said, can you describe yourself in 3 words? Young, fly, flash.
Young Fly Flash.
The game plan, according to what came out in court, was straight predatory. Cash Out allegedly used his celebrity status and social media presence to lure women with false promises of financial opportunities. We're talking about young ladies who might have been dreaming about breaking into the industry or just trying to get their paper up, getting hit with promises of record deals, money, and fame.
I'm in that category who can rap, so that's what really separated myself from a lot of artists in Atlanta.
There you have it. Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
On top, man. Still on top. Still grinding.
But check this. This wasn't no one-man operation. This whole scheme allegedly had his peoples involved, turning it into what the prosecutors called a family business from hell. His mom's, Linda Smith, they called her Mama Cash Out, and his cousin Tyrone Taylor were both allegedly deep in this mess, each one playing their part in what the state said was a whole trafficking network. That family angle is what really made this case wild, no cap. We ain't talking about some rapper who just lost his way. According to the prosecution, this was allegedly a whole family operation built on exploiting women. When your own blood is supposedly down with hurting people like that, it shows just how deep this alleged operation really went.
I'd like to say thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. Not a day, ever since I turned myself in, I was always prayerful for the victims. I take accountability. I pray for them continuously.
The spots where all this allegedly went down became the focus of the whole case. The prosecution said crimes happened at a hotel near Fulton Industrial Boulevard and a residence in Atlanta's Carroll Heights neighborhood. These weren't just random locations. They were allegedly the headquarters where victims got controlled and exploited. The control methods that got described in court were straight up diabolical. Word is women were isolated from their families, had their IDs taken, and were coached not to speak to police. That's some next level manipulation right there, cutting people off from their support system and making them dependent on their captors. The most messed up part about all this was how basic human needs allegedly got weaponized. Prosecutors put evidence on the table showing women were only fed if they performed acts. Using food as control? That's some cold-hearted stuff that goes way beyond just being a street dude trying to get money. The money flow in this alleged operation was set up like a real business, but the wrong kind of business. According to testimony that came out in court, victims were allegedly forced to deposit earnings into kitchen drawers or send them digitally to Cash Out or his mother. That created a whole financial pipeline that allegedly moved money from exploiting these women straight into the pockets of the people who were supposed to be protecting them.
And, sometimes you gotta be heartless, especially in this game, man. You gotta take advantage, man.
When April 2022 rolled around, all that street activity caught up with them in a major way. Fulton County District Attorney Fannie Willis came through with a 41-count indictment against Cash Out and 5 other people, including his family members. The charges were no joke. We're talking aggravated sodomy, human trafficking, RICO violations, pimping, pandering, firearm charges during felonies, keeping a place of prostitution, obstruction, and contraband charges. The RICO angle was particularly significant for the culture. RICO laws were originally designed to take down organized crime families, but now they're getting used to target hip-hop collectives and labels. By hitting Cash Out with RICO charges, the prosecution was basically saying his music operation was a front for a criminal enterprise.
As far as, going through the things that you normally go through when you live in the life, that type of life, as far as, getting in trouble, catching cases and catching a serious case.
Cash Out's first move when these charges dropped was to deny everything. He pleaded not guilty and hit Instagram stories with some spiritual talk, claiming he would be set free. That response showed he was planning to fight this thing in court instead of taking any plea deals. The charges got updated in June 2023, with new evidence and additional victims being added to the case. That meant the investigators kept building their case and probably found more people willing to speak up about what allegedly went down.
I just went another way. When I went through my situation, certain things make you, and certain people who come to you make you go another way, you feel me? And I'm glad, that person, in that situation, that God put me through, made me go towards the music, you feel me?
What made this case stand out from other rapper legal troubles was how systematic and organized the alleged crimes were. This wasn't about getting caught with drugs or guns, or even isolated violent incidents. The prosecution was painting a picture of a long-term operation that allegedly hurt multiple victims over years. The contrast between Cash Out's public image as a successful artist and what the indictment was alleging couldn't have been more different. The same platform and resources that brought him legitimate success in the music game were allegedly allegedly being used to commit some of the most serious crimes you can face in the justice system. What's really wild about this whole situation is how the alleged criminal operation was running parallel to Cash Out's legitimate music hustle. While he was dropping hits, working with major artists, and building his brand in the industry, the prosecution said he was simultaneously putting together a network designed to exploit vulnerable women. From the block to the billboard, Cash Out's rise. To really understand how Cash Out allegedly flipped his success into something so twisted, we gotta rewind and check out how Homie built his empire in the first place. See, the story of John Michael Hakeem Gibson coming up in the game initially looked like one of those feel-good hood stories, young cat from the struggle, who turned his pain into platinum plaques. Born August 15, 1990, in Atlanta, Georgia, Gibson came up in circumstances that a lot of people from the inner city can relate to. We're talking about generational poverty, the type of struggle where opportunities are scarce, and the streets start looking like the only way to make something happen. His first real run-in with the law went down in 2009 when he caught a gun charge in Clayton County, Georgia. For a lot of young brothers from the hood, that first arrest becomes the beginning of a cycle that's hard to break. But Gibson's story took a different turn when he beat that case and got acquitted. That acquittal became his wake-up call, the moment that supposedly made him realize he needed to find a different path.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of friends, got caught up in death situations, jail situations,
Instead of staying in the streets, Gibson made the decision to channel that energy into music. He started grinding with the independent label Bases Loaded and eventually caught the attention of Epic Records, a major label deal that most artists from his background could only dream about. That progression from indie to major was proof that he had real talent and commercial appeal. When 2012 rolled around, Cash Out dropped the track that would change his whole life, Cashin' Out. This joint wasn't just a song, it became a cultural moment. The track peaked at number 36 on the Billboard Hot 100 and topped the Billboard Rap Airplay chart, eventually going platinum. For a cat who was facing gun charges just a few years earlier, this was the type of success that proves the American dream is still possible. The success of that single got amplified when some of the biggest names in the game decided to jump on remixes. We're talking about heavyweights like Ludacris, Da Brat, Bow Wow, Akon, Fabulous, and Yo Gotti, all putting their own spin on the track. When established artists of that caliber co-sign your work, it's like getting the keys to the industry.
I ventured off into other things, movies, things that I'm capable of doing. I'm versatile, so I'm a hustler. I can be able to do anything that I put my mind to.
Following up a massive hit is always challenging in this game, and Cash Out experienced that pressure firsthand. His next single, Big Booty, in July 2012, didn't catch the same lightning in a bottle as Cashin' Out. That's the reality of the music business. Sometimes you strike gold and sometimes you don't.
I want to get in with Kanye or Pharrell or different artists I want to get in with. Reach out to me, because I'm always reach out to you, man to man.
But Cash Out wasn't about to let one single define his whole career. In 2013, he linked up with Future for Another Country, showing that he could hold his own with Atlanta's established stars. Future was already a major player in the ATL scene, so getting him on a track was a big move that showed Cash Out's growing influence in the city. The comeback single that really put him back on the map was She Twerkin' in 2014. The track hit number 100 on the Billboard Hot 100, which might not sound as impressive as his first hit, but it proved he could still get radio play and chart positions. More importantly, it served as the lead single for his debut album.
New York and Cali, I want the whole country to know me, and different people, Japan, all that. I want to be able to go overseas and they know me. So when you drop that album, you do the numbers that you expect.
Exactly.
During this peak period of his career, Cash Out looked like he was living proof that you could change your circumstances through talent and hard work. He had platinum plaques, industry connections, and a growing fan base that respected his authenticity and hustle.
You never seen me on the internet, that's how you never knew about the situation. It was always behind the scenes, only people who was in the circle you knew.
But what the streets and the fans didn't know was that, according to prosecutors, something much darker was allegedly developing behind the scenes. The timeline is what makes this whole situation so crazy. Prosecutors claimed that as early as 2013, right when Cash Out was experiencing his biggest musical success, he was already involved in criminal activities that would eventually bring down everything he had built.
I'ma just set the money out and be like, this plaque money right here, get everybody names and make sure we do it the right way, because it just came in like 2 weeks ago.
I was the first one to play Cashin' Out.
The contrast between his public success and his alleged private activities is what makes this story so shocking. While fans were celebrating his rise and fellow artists were showing respect for his grind, prosecutors would later argue that he was allegedly using his newfound status and resources for something completely different. This split between the public cash out and the alleged criminal cash out would become the central theme of his downfall. His music career wasn't just about artistic expression or making money. According to law enforcement, it became the perfect cover for a criminal enterprise that allegedly operated for over 7 years. The foundation for this alleged operation was Pires Music Group LLC, his record label. What looked like a legitimate business in the music industry allegedly got twisted into a front for luring and exploiting vulnerable women. The label gave him the perfect setup, a reason to meet new people, especially young women interested in entertainment careers, plus justification for unusual financial transactions and irregular schedules. The success Cash Out achieved through Cashing Out and his other releases gave him several tools that prosecutors would later argue were essential to his alleged criminal enterprise. His celebrity status made him attractive to people who might be impressed by fame. His financial resources allowed him to maintain the locations and infrastructure that were allegedly used in the trafficking operation. His industry connections provided a network that could potentially be exploited. Perhaps most importantly, his music label provided what prosecutors characterized as the perfect front for criminal activity. A record label naturally involves meeting new people, particularly young women interested in entertainment careers. It provides justification for unusual financial transactions, irregular schedules, and association with people from various backgrounds. For someone allegedly running a criminal enterprise, a music label would be almost perfect cover. The broader impact of this case on hip-hop culture is something the community is still processing. The use of RICO laws against rap artists has become increasingly common, with prosecutors arguing that music labels and crews sometimes serve as fronts for criminal operations. Critics say this approach unfairly targets hip-hop culture and treats artistic expression like criminal evidence. The streets might forget a lot of things, but they won't forget how Cash Out's story ended. Not with platinum plaques or sold-out shows, but with a life sentence and a legacy forever stained by the systematic exploitation of vulnerable women. That's the realest lesson of all. This is just one story. Click any of the suggested cards on your screen to uncover more now.